Hello, everybody, and welcome back to today's episode of Twomey Time. We have a very special guest on. Her name is Destiny Byrd. She has her Master's of Science in Nursing from Vanderbilt University, and she has her Bachelor's in Public Health from USC. She is here today to talk about her transition into the field of nursing. She is a national certified nurse practitioner. She is certified in both women's health and adult gerontology primary care. She is also a certified menopause practitioner. And Destiny is joining us here today. Thanks so much for coming on, Destiny.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. Me too. Destiny and I actually both did a similar track at Vanderbilt. And so it's fun to chat about her experience and to see everything that she's done since graduation, which is quite impressive. And I'm excited to get into it today. And Destiny, usually I start out with just like a fun icebreaker just to get to know you a little bit. I was wondering if there's anything that you've been reading recently or watching or a guilty pleasure like TV show that's been kind of a way for you to relax at all, or anything that you might recommend to the audience that you think has been something that you've been enjoying recently.
I like a lot of cooking shows. I've been watching a lot of
Oh,
Chopped. I enjoy cooking. It's a stress reliever, and it helps with the busy life of being an NP. I meal prep too. Get a lot of new exciting
mm.
ideas from Chopped. Food Network is my go-to.
Nice, nice. And the Chop's like the competitive show,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where people get, I guess, chopped, hence the name of Chopped, chopped off.
Yes, I love it when they present the basket of ingredients. So I think of like how I would prepare it all if I were on Chop. So it's pretty good, and they're endless episodes. They've been making it forever, and there's still new episodes. So
That's true. Well, cool. Good to know. I didn't know that you loved cooking so much, and even better to know that if you only had four ingredients that were very random and didn't necessarily taste good together, you could make it taste great. So I think
yes,
that's 100% a skill to have, which is really neat. And
yes,
as you mentioned, especially it's really hard to have time outside of being an MP sometimes, and specifically especially if you're working full time. So I love that you found like a hobby or something that you can kind of look forward to. And meal prepping, as you probably know, definitely helps with long days and long hours
absolutely,
after work. Yeah.
absolutely,
So, Destiny, I'm curious. I love that you have your bachelor's in public health. I think that's super unique and very useful for nurse practitioners to have that background, as far as like the public health knowledge goes, and especially when you kind of probably transitioned into this NP role. Can you tell us a little bit about your how you found nurse practitionering, becoming an NP? Was this something you always wanted to do? Was the field of nursing something that kind of just fell into your lap after you completed your bachelor's program? Can you tell us a little bit about how you found the field of nursing?
yes. So completing my bachelor's in public health program, it was a very different healthcare lens, looking at the healthcare system from a different perspective. During that program, during that role, doing different internships, having different experiences related to public health, I realized that my impact on individuals' health wasn't as great as I would have liked. And then one of my close friends, her sister actually went through the same program at Vanderbilt. And so I ended up talking to her about her experience, doing more research about what all is a nurse practitioner. I knew what a nurse practitioner was, but I really didn't understand the role. Once I looked into it further, looked into the field of nursing further, it seemed like the best option for me to really have that change that I wanted to be in the field of healthcare, to be able to work with patients one on one versus with public health is such a macro level. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate being able to see the results of my efforts in my work pretty frequently, like with each patient encounter versus years down the line with public health. It's a slower process for sure.
Yeah, and I think that it's cool to get that macro perspective though, because it can definitely, I mean, it trickles into the field of nursing, of course, always, especially as a provider, and understanding that macro level can really be helpful. And I think that's unique because on the bachelor's of science of nursing level, I felt like we didn't always get that macro. It's not a lot of policy. We're not kind of really understanding the larger overview. So I think it's really great that you were able to kind of bring that into the role of being a nurse practitioner. I'm sure you found it helpful too, and just having a overall view of things was probably, I would imagine, was helpful.
Agreed, agreed. And it helps understand different state programming, just understanding the field of public health, because even in my nursing preparation program and everything, we didn't really talk about public health in the macro level sense. It was still more individualized. Yes, we talked about public health as far as like the statistics, but not on the
Yeah.
same levels like the macro public health level, learning about the different programs to implement, the different health campaigns, how all that works, how funding works at
Hmm.
local, state, federal level as well. So that was pretty helpful.
I think it's very unique that, first of all, I just feel like I felt for all of the direct entry students because you guys were working on overload, like 200% of your capacity. I feel like taking your NCLEX while you're already in your master's level training program. What was that like going through more of an accelerated section of the kind of like the bachelor's of nursing or getting your RN and then to transition into a master's level program while you're still studying for the NCLEX and taking that, but you're already having to focus on your master's level training. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like for you as a student?
Yeah, to be quite honest, it was all a blur. It was like just keeping your head above water. I knew I had a goal, and each day I was going to get closer to that goal. So it was just literally day by day, moment by moment, test by test, class by class. In hindsight, it was pretty amazing. When I was in it, it was just staying afloat. Yes, it
Yeah,
definitely was a
yeah.
challenge. There was a lot going on at once, a lot of information being thrown at you. It was a lot.
And clinicals too, because
Mhm.
you were doing your clinicals as an RN, and
Mhm.
then well, I thought about this a lot because it is like training a different part of your brain almost. So bedside nursing, yes, a lot of the skills do transition over into being an advanced practice registered nurse, but it's a total different way to kind of train your brain to look at things. And I could imagine that was also like a mental shift for you guys, for you all going through the direct entry program. Was that not so much of a problem because you had some time to transition, or did you feel like, wow, this is like a brain shift almost?
It definitely was a brain shift, but honestly, I think it was actually kind of also helpful that it was a direct entry program in that sense, where I didn't get it wasn't difficult for me to break the RN way of thinking, so to speak, for lack
Yeah.
of better words. And even in classes and stuff during the direct entry program, we were focused on the RN preparation. Our instructors, our professors, they would often have to redirect us. Remember, you're at the RN level, we're not thinking provider level. So I think a lot of us, my cohort, my peers, we did come in thinking like, how can we think at the provider level? And they had to bring us down to thinking at the RN level
Mm.
first. And so I think once we were able to move on to the provider level, to have that freedom to think where, we initially intended to be at, it wasn't as much of a transition as you may expect. I mean, it definitely was a transition. I don't want to downplay it, but it was easier than it sounds like on paper, in my
Yeah, and
opinion.
that's a good point. Like, probably someone who's been a bedside nurse for 5, 10 years that's used to the nursing way of thinking, and then just that you're right, the transition from that, from it's almost like muscle memory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And versus it didn't almost have the opportunity to become muscle memory yet because it's also new and fresh. And so I do think that's really unique, that I think that's a good thing for you to do the direct entry program. I think that is a positive. It's a good win for nursing in the sense that you can not that you just have the opportunity to get to the master's level where you want to be at, especially if that's what you want to do. So I think it's great that we have those programs, that they're offered. I know they can be very intimidating for people because they are
Absolutely.
a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot.
So Were you just curious for the RN portion of the training into your master's level training? Your cohort, was it all are the same students going into the master's level training, or so it was kind of separate? So that's unique too, I feel.
Yes, so all the students who came in to do the RN portion, we all came in at the same time, and then we broke off into our different specialties after we finished our RN portion. So some of
Mm.
my peers, I only saw them in the RN portion because we all had different specialties, and then it was like we really didn't see each other after that, just different tracks. But there were a group of us that came in together.
And how long was that transition? Was that a 3-year program full time, or was it, how long was the program for our listeners thinking of doing something similar?
My program was a 3-year program, but I also did a dual certification. Since I specialized in women's health and adult gerontology, it was a little bit longer. I can't say how long others' programs were who didn't do the dual
Yeah.
program, but I know mine was a little longer, and it was just straight for 3 years. No time off, not a month off. Like there was zero time off. So it was pretty intense, and the course load was pretty heavy consistently throughout it. We
Hmm.
consistently had a lot of credit hours each semester. So it definitely was tough. There was no time to have a life at all. Um, at all. You were lucky if you were able to go out with friends, like even like twice a month. That might even be a
Yeah.
stretch. It was just your nose and your head was literally in the books. You lived at the library. You didn't have a life at
Yeah.
home. No.
Yeah.
So it was
What
three
do you
long
think of,
years.
very long years, and you're so right, doing your dual program, that of course people don't realize that when you add on an additional certification, it also includes those clinical practicum hours
Right.
and the classes, of course, that go along with it. Are you, now that you've been out for 3 years now, you've been practicing for 3 years at Destiny's, really unique because she's actually utilizing both of her certifications pretty much to almost some of the highest levels that she can be, which we'll get into later on in our chat today. But curious if you're thinking back about if you would do anything differently, or if you would still pursue the dual route or the dual program certification, or if you've changed thoughts on that now that you've graduated.
I love that I did the dual program. I'm all about learning as much as I can, and I think the dual program really prepared me, gave me that foundation to learn as much as I can. There's just so much to learn about the human body, about health in general, taking care of people. I'm glad that I did the dual program and I have those specialty clinical hours as well as far as the women's health. That's is so valuable. Adult gerontology. If I would have done adult gerontology only, I do not think I would have been prepared to do the women's health work that I do today. Just because
Yeah.
the clinical hours, not only the clinical hours were they different, but also what I learned in my classes were very different. I got a much more in-depth understanding of a lot of GYN and
Mhm.
labor and delivery issues, concerns, health issues, complications during my women's health courses, training, practicum, that type of thing. It was a completely different experience, and I'm glad I did both. Also, I expanded my network. So I have classmates that did only women's health, and I have classmates that did only adult gerontology. And so by having those two separate cohorts, my network has also expanded. There were very few of us who did dual. I think there might have been about 12 of us. So we also formed a close knit group, and where we still reach out to each other to this day too. So I would not change doing dual. I think it was great that I did that. I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I know I feel very similar as doing completing the dual program as well. I think often back to just if we only received our adult gerontology education and our practicum hours, and that's what we had graduated with. Not that you couldn't obviously learn or do, transition into women's health, but I think we got pretty exceptional education when it comes to our training. And I think that if anything, it probably helped us feel a little bit more confident when we graduated and started to transition into practice. I did feel having those extra clinical hours only helped me grow my confidence a little bit
Absolutely.
more. Yeah, and just feel more confident just in general and feel that I had a solid knowledge base before the transition occurred, because the transition is hard regardless of dual non-dual program
Yes.
experience, no experience as a nurse. uh, I think we all know it was a difficult. Well, I felt like I was a hard transition. I don't know. Tell us a little bit about your transition, in just how you felt. Did you find it to be difficult? Was it what you expected? I would love to hear some of
Yes.
your thoughts.
So my transition, it was tough, like most new grads. I would say I did have an upper hand in the fact that I had a great mentor on the job, still my current supervisor. He really held my hand, helping me understand not only like just navigating the nurse practitioner role, and what that means like on the job, but also like the politics side of it too. The organization I work with, they have like an APRN council, which really helps advocate for advanced practice nursing. And so learning about what nurse practitioners have fought for, like as far as skills to be able to do that they were trained to do, just all the way from this particular individual, he's been a nurse practitioner for 20 plus years. So just hearing his
Wow.
perspective, how the field has changed, it makes me more grateful for the opportunities that I do have today, and more grateful that I'm not having as much pushback as, say, he did 20 years ago. Also, where I practice is full practice authority as well too. So there was no one really holding my hand at all, as far as checking my charts. Of course, whenever you go to a new organization, someone's checking your charts for a little bit. Um, but so that also was an extra weight, because some people think, oh, I'm going to be a nurse practitioner and someone will be overseeing my work. No, no, you should not think of it like that at all. You're
Mhm.
still practicing under your license. If you do anything wrong, that will be your license, your malpractice insurance. No one else is coming to save you.
Mhm.
And so I think once I realized that as a new grad, it changed the ball game. I realized that I had great preceptors too, and they helped me understand that. But once you're in it, it's just a completely
Yeah.
different story. You don't have anyone to just sit there like, is this right? No,
Yeah.
is what plan did you come up with? Do you think this is right? Do you think this is great for the patient? Yes, if I had questions, I had someone I could go walk down the hall and ask them, but it's not like a situation where you consult about every single patient. Like you're not at clinicals anymore. So it was definitely like a steep learning curve for sure. And in the billing side, I think that was the other learning
Yeah.
curve. So you're learning how to chart efficiently. It's easy to just say you know how to chart, but to be efficient while staying on schedule, while also learning about new medical conditions that maybe you didn't learn about in school. My patient population, they're very complex. You hear of a lot of things that aren't common in the general population. They're very, it's a very small population that they have a lot of different health issues, health challenges that typical Americans don't have. And so I had to do a lot of learning, self educating about these different conditions that have come up with my patients. And even now, sometimes, like my patient, they'll come to me, a new patient, they have something I've never heard of, and I've just gotten quite comfortable saying, I've never heard of that, but I'll make sure I'll do some research. I'll get with your specialist to see what I can do to help you. And I've
Wow.
gotten very comfortable with
Yeah.
that. And patients appreciate that too.
100%.
So
Yeah.
the transition, it was a challenge, but I'm glad I was at the facility that I'm currently at for that transition. They were really helpful in that.
Sounds like you highlighted a couple things that you felt you had strong mentors. So you felt like you had somebody that not only mentors during your practicum rotations when you were a student, but also had mentors in the sense of on the job training when you transition to be an independent advanced practice provider in your role where you're fully competent to care for your patients, you're licensed to do so, and you're independent, having that go to person that when you needed help or just even transitioning into practice and guiding you through that process, because it feels very lonely when you get into practice and you're the only NP out there, or if you're, the only NP that you're working with, or you're alone and you have been used to working with your preceptor all the time. So it's a it's a definitely a different transition from what we were used to as students. But I like that you mentioned, so it sounds like you had a really good mentor that was available for you when needed,
Mm-hmm.
which is great, and that they're still there. I think it's unique that you also had a great APRN mentor as well, somebody that's been in the field for a very long time, that their challenges, probably, you're so right, 15, 20 years ago are so different than the
Mm-hmm.
challenges that the nurse practitioner is facing today, which I am so grateful for, that they have paved the path for all of the nurse practitioners now. um, and I think it's really even better that you highlighted the fact that just admitting to your patients when you don't know something and saying, hey, you know what, I'm not really sure, I'm not super familiar with that, but I am going to do my research or chat with your specialist. I feel like a lot of nurse practitioners get afraid to admit, hey, I don't know this, or admit, or like call up the specialist. They're usually, most of the time, very open to chatting with nurse practitioners or chatting with primary care, especially primary care, about how
Mm-hmm.
they can advocate for their patients so that they don't always have to be relying on going to see the specialist all the time, because it's really like a team-based care. So I love that you highlighted that. So thanks for sharing that little tidbit.
Yes. Yes.
When you I'm kind of curious, how long did it take you to really feel comfortable or confident in your role as a nurse practitioner? um, I'm sure you probably went through different phases of comfortability. I know I felt like it was like up and down constantly.
Yes. I don't know. I would say that that's a tricky question in a sense that for me, I try to never get too comfortable and always double check everything to be as safe as
Yeah.
possible. So even if it's something that I've like prescribed a gazillion times, I don't know. I'm just that person. I always double check everything. But as far as when I was efficient with my charting time, seeing my patients on time, working smoothly, um, organizing my team appropriately, training them appropriately, I'd probably say about a year, year and a half, when everything was like flowing like a well-oiled machine. And part of that transition too is also learning your organizational culture. So that was also a challenge, learning how this organization works, what do they expect.
Yeah.
So there are
Yeah.
just so many different things that you're getting adjusted to when you're a new nurse practitioner. It's not just the clinical side, but it's the politics, the organization, the culture. Are you training other people too while you're also new? Like, for example, when I stepped into my new role at the facility I'm currently in, I had an RN who was on my team. She was new to women's health. So there was training her. And then I had an LPN on my team too. She was relatively new to women's health. I think she maybe had been there max maybe 6 months to a year in women's health. So it was a lot of training other people, helping them understand expectations. So there were many different things to get adjusted to at once, which is why I think new grad nurse practitioners can get overwhelmed. It's not just a clinical side that you're getting used to. It's just so many different things going on.
Yeah. And good point. It is really hard to train other people when you're learning yourself. And also, it puts you in this management role too, where you're not only training, but you're managing your team, and you're all trying to work together to be the most efficient team process and give patients great care at the end of the day. How did you, efficiency wise, what are some tips you might have for a new provider if they're trying to become more efficient, or to chart more efficiently? You mentioned that it does take time, of course, to become efficient. It takes you obviously getting to know your patients, getting to know your healthcare system, getting to know your EHR, getting to know
Mm-hmm.
how your teammates work together, delegating appropriately so that you can become more efficient. Yeah, do you have any tips for new grads or new providers
Yes.
coming into the role?
So what I did early on was I requested a PD, position description, of everyone on my team. So I knew who could do what according to their job description. What I found when I first arrived, people didn't realize what they could and couldn't do. It was always up in the air. I don't think I can do it. No, you should know what you can and cannot do. So that was some of the training I had to do with my team. No, according to your job description, you can do this, or according to your job description, this should be delegated to this person instead. And so I think
Mhm.
this definitely helped my team work efficiently. The other thing is learning your charting system, your EHR. That is a learning curve in of itself. So really taking the time to understand how to navigate your EHR. And with that, for me, pre-charting is really huge. So originally when I was new, had a little bit more time on my schedule, building my patient load up. I had time to pre-chart the day before. Those days are way gone. So, but I try to at least look at the patient's chart the morning of, or if not, a few minutes before they come in. So not only am I familiar with their medical history, but also what they're coming in for. I can anticipate their needs. For example, is this person going to need a pelvic exam? Is this going to be a procedure? So then I can tell my team too, so they can go collect supplies and we can be ready and prepared for that patient versus in the middle of the patient encounter, oh, we're going to do this procedure. We're going to need these supplies. You just added at least 5, 10 more minutes onto that appointment that you really don't have in your schedule. So just
Totally,
trying to
totally.
anticipate the needs of the day with each patient, I think is huge. And then with the pre-charting too, anticipating what orders you may need. The charting system that I use is very archaic. It doesn't help you chart at all. You have to manually put in everything. If I order someone a mammogram, I have to manually put in my note, mammogram order. There's no automation at
Wow.
all.
Oh,
So
that's tough.
it's
That's so
very
tough.
very time consuming. So with my pre-charting, I try to anticipate what orders may be needed. I can go ahead and start putting that in the pre-chart note to just kind of help make things smoother as well.
Mm. Can you talk a little bit about if you do like a pre-huddle with your team in the morning? What do you find helpful? Also, do you utilize your team members to insert some of these orders for you when they're anticipating things, or, something that if you have a procedure and they know exactly what needs to be ordered, they're pending that Pap smear order to you. They're pending your pathology order to you if they know that you're going to do a procedure. Sounds like you did a ton of coaching with your team and a ton of role management as far as like your scope of practice goes. Tell us, can you tell our listeners a little bit how you organize your day to be successful? Do you use your team? Do you involve your team in that, or is it just something you do on your own?
Yeah, so I expect my team to work to the fullest extent that their job description allows them to. And I tell everybody we all have our roles. No one can do the other person's job. So we all need to pull our own weight. My team is great. They're all very ambitious. They're there, they're ready to work. What we typically do is we look at our schedule a week in advance to look over who's
Wow.
coming in, what those patients may need, see if we need to move anyone. Like, for example, if someone needs some additional times, like, oh, this is going to be a longer visit, just kind of anticipating those needs. And then if we need to like squeeze a patient in because something came up, we need to see them sooner. We also have a scheduler on our team. They're able to take notes during that huddle. The huddle is probably like 15, 20 minutes max. And then the scheduler, she's able to contact the patients, get them moved, whatever adjustments we need to make, we do at that time. And then
Okay.
the nurses do help with putting some of the orders in, like for their labs, their any annual labs or anything like that they may need. And then the morning of, we try to do a quick 2-3 minute huddle, just like what's going on today, did anything change, that type of thing, just basically going over the changes and confirming things are still correct. But throughout the day, I'm constantly communicating with my team. For
Yeah.
example, if I'm talking to a patient and I anticipate, oh, this may be an unexpected procedure, but we need to do it today, I just quickly send my team an IM so they can start working on getting those things together while I'm sitting there talking to that patient. Is really what I found is the work life balance really comes from trying to be as efficient as possible. We don't have downtime at all. There is
Mhm.
no catch up time unless you catch up at home. So, really being efficient with every single minute of the day, I found is huge for my work life balance and my team satisfaction too. in comparison to people who maybe not do like exactly what we do. But if like just anticipating those needs, something as simple as that, that makes the entire team's job easier versus creating a more like chaotic, stressful environment because they don't know what's coming.
Good point. I'd love to know more. I mean, I try for my own practice to incorporate more of like a team huddle. This is the first time I'm in a at a an organization that has more of a team-based model approach versus just you and your medical assistant. So I love having team where you have an RN or a medical assistant or an LPN and you on the team. Tell me a little bit about that week huddle prior. Are you the one running that? How do you have time to do that? Do you have a lot of time, like admin time, that you utilize for this team huddle? I love that your scheduler is on there because the scheduler can take away and modify all those appointments that you chatted about, so you're not utilizing your medical assistant's time changing those appointments.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also awesome that your practice does that. So twofold question: one, how do you find the time to do that? When do you do it? And then the follow-up question to that is, was this and something already implemented before you transitioned into practice for this clinic? Was this clinic doing this before you got there, or was this something you came up with that you felt like was going to be helpful for your team?
So this clinic, they encourage you to do huddles. Not everybody does huddles each team just because like it's hectic, it's chaotic,
Yeah.
everybody's constantly busy. But who leads the huddle? That's the LPN. She will what we call like scrub the schedule, essentially look at it a week in advance. She'll come to huddle with the notes. She'll kind of like give report about like what's going on for the following week, and then I would basically just give directions. Hey, that patient needs to be moved. We need additional time, that type of thing, based on her report. And then the scheduler is there during that. And then the RN is there as well to help with any other patient needs that there may be. And then we take about 20 minutes once a week to do that. And we
Okay.
have admin time for about 4 hours a week. And so we do it during admin time.
Okay.
So that's when we're able to usually get it done. It would be too hectic to try to do it in the middle of clinic. So,
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. I love that because I don't I am not somebody that looks a week in advance, mainly because I just haven't built in that time to do that. But I think you're correct. If you're able to anticipate things a week in advance and say, hey, I'm not going to call this patient last minute the day before, they might be taking time off of work to come in for the
right,
appointment. They might not be able to change their time slot, and also scrubbing the schedule to identify, I know that patient's going to take more than a 15-minute visit, more than a 20-minute visit. And if I can modify the schedule, that's not only going to help my team, but it's going to help us be more efficient, be on time, and therefore you're not stressing day of being
right.
super overwhelmed with back-to-back complex patients without the time that you need. So I think that is a really valuable advice that you just gave to lots of nurse practitioners out there. And what are some things that you think, if a nurse practitioner is not doing that with their team, maybe what are some helpful ways that you can maybe start implementing that into your routine? Is there any like hiccups you kind of found along the way, or is there anything that you could, or any advice you might give to a nurse practitioner wanting to do that with your team?
If someone is wanting to start, I would just say start small. Maybe start with that daily huddle, 2 to 3 minutes. And maybe your daily huddle, it will be better served being in the afternoon after all the patients are
Mm,
gone, or maybe midday if you have a break for lunch. That way you can see what's going on the next day, and then you still have time to contact those patients, move things around if necessary. Otherwise, doing it the day of your first time looking at patients, for me, that still would be a little hectic. But if that's the only time you have to do it, it's better than nothing for sure. So I would start by doing it one day at a time, whether it's the day before or the morning of. But also, you want to allow your team time to reach out to these people if they need to or anticipate the needs. The other thing
yeah,
with doing it the day of, you people have unscheduled absences from work all the time. And so if you're doing it the day of, that could also be a little hectic if you have any team members that are going to be out.
sure.
And then you're not able to anticipate that absence. And then it just makes your day potentially even more hectic. So I definitely think doing it the day before is most helpful. So at least you have that information in case one of your team members are out, and you can relay that information to whoever is taking their place for that day too.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that piece of advice. I think that can definitely be helpful for anyone, even if you're new or as new providers or seasoned providers that are just looking for ways to make their day go a little bit smoother, to be a little bit more efficient. So great point. I think that a lot of organizations are really pushing for more of team-based models in the sense of huddling and utilizing huddles a little bit more often. And I do find them. I was never like a big huddle fan. I used to hate huddles, like even as a bedside nurse. And I'm finding that my opinion on that has been changing because you do end up seeing like, oh, these are pretty beneficial. So I think you just have to modify it to include what you think is important and kind
Exactly.
of run it how you feel is going to be beneficial for you, of course.
Exactly. Make it efficient use of everyone's time. Like during a huddle, we're not talking about ways we can improve overall as a team. Like during our one weekly huddle, yes. But those daily huddles, it's straight to the point. You don't have time for long extended things or
Mm,
team building. I think that's why some people think when they think of huddle, they have a negative thought associated with that. It's because they think about all the times huddle delayed them from doing their work that day.
work. Yeah, yeah. Or they
So,
found it not particularly helpful for them or applicable to
right.
them talking about other team goals that may not be as like urgent
Right,
to care for.
exactly,
I'm
exactly.
curious, Destiny, can you speak a little bit to how, say, things are not going well with your team? Maybe you identified, hey, we're really struggling with this part of our communication style, or do you do like a team check in to give feedback to each other where they can give feedback to you and vice versa? Do you schedule that? Is that like a quarterly thing, or is that just more like when we need it, we'll meet and huddle?
It's kind of like an informal thing. Like if I feel like one particular team member might be stressed or might be having some other issues going on, I usually just pull them to the side and do a check-in like, hey, is there anything I could be doing to help you? Or is there something going on? Is your workload too much? So I just kind of check in with them like that. But during the huddle time, the once weekly huddle too, there's also an opportunity for everyone to voice their concerns as well. But not everybody feels comfortable in a group setting too. So
Yeah.
I always have my door open for my team if they have a question for me as well.
Great. And I think that that's important too. You're creating like an environment that people are going to grow together. It's encouraging to get constructive criticism and feedback so that the whole team can change. And also
Right.
it's important to be like, hey, I'm overwhelmed and I'm stressed. No wonder why I can't get that. It's unrealistic, whatever the expectations are set, to modify them or to advocate for more help for your team
Exactly.
too when you need it.
Yeah.
Um, because we're all busy. It's really busy. And it can be really discouraging when you're working so hard every single day. You don't get a break, you might not get a lunch, and
Mm-hmm.
it's exhausting. So I think like
Absolutely.
building up your team morale is super important, and it sounds like you've really focused on that a lot, and I commend you as a new provider because I think that's hard. It's hard to also
Yeah.
like step into that role while you're learning to also being that management role, which if you didn't have that aspect of your training as a student, I feel like that can be a lot. Did you have with your clinical practicum rotations, was that built into a lot of the rotations or not at all?
The public health background more so because in public health,
Mm,
between the education, working in public health, it's all team based. Figuring out how to work together as a team to get the job done and campaign, whatever the task is, it's very team based. Also, during my undergraduate experience, I was in a lot of different leadership roles within the university that I attended. So that also helped as far as organizing a team, figuring out a goal. That was really helpful. So for me, it kind of felt natural because I had been doing it for quite some time, and even outside of professional education, that type of thing, I've just taken on leadership roles in different areas of my life. So I do have that experience. So it does come natural to me to get everybody to work together. What can we do? And then I've also been on the other end of poor leadership too. So I see
mm.
what the results of that are and how that can be frustrating as well.
I can definitely see that you have strong leadership skills, even through my time with you when we were both students together. So I can see that now, even through how you're speaking about your team, about how you're speaking about your everyday clinical practice. So that is so useful for you as a provider. Also, everyone else around you probably feels your strong leadership skills. So, and that starts from a younger age when you were in your other programs. So,
Hmm.
thanks so much for sharing that. That's definitely exemplified by how you speak about your clinical practice as well. So, yeah, you're gonna be moving on to do big things in your life. I know that
Well,
for sure.
thanks.
So I want to transition a little bit to I know that you spent some time teaching already as a provider, and I know you've been kind of training new, not only nurse practitioners, I know you mentioned like some physician assistants as well, and residents as well. Can you speak a little bit to being a mentor for others and also how you balance your day, staying efficient, staying on time with having a student, and kind of like the balancing having a student? Do you enjoy having a student? What are some ways some nurse? So a lot of NPs might be interested in taking on students, but maybe they're a little bit nervous about having a student. Maybe can you speak a little bit about your experience being a mentor for some of these students?
Yes. I would say that perspective is everything. We were all once students, but I try not to focus on negative things. I try to think of things in a positive way. Yes, students can slow you down. It can make you less efficient, but instead I try to think of this person could be taking care of me tomorrow. Let me figure out how I can help them become the best provider that they can be. And I try to think of ways that I can utilize them throughout my clinical day to help me stay on task. So sometimes that may be, hey, I'm running a few minutes behind. I need you to go ahead and see this next patient. I'll be in a room in a few minutes. Or it may be, hey, I need you to do this note. I'm going to check behind you, sign off on it. We'll review it at a later time, but we need to keep going through the clinic day. Or, hey, you're going to go do this exam with this patient. The nurse is going to be there. I'll be in there shortly. So it's really trying to utilize them as much as you can. When they come from a good program that prepares them, that makes it easier versus someone who you may have to give them more of a foundational knowledge base. That definitely is more of a challenge. It's harder to utilize them during a clinic day for sure.
Mm,
But I also just try to push my students to do the best they can. This is your time to mess up. No one's gonna yell at you. You're not gonna harm anyone. Like, I'm here. You're not signing off on anything without me looking at it.
yeah.
Like, it's okay. Like, this is your time to make mistakes. It's okay. So I really do push them to do a lot. And usually the feedback I get from my students, I learned so much with you. I'm glad you did because you're X amount of months away from graduation. This is your time. You should be just running this clinic. I just know
Yeah.
that the clinic time, like with the patients back to back, it's hard for you to actually run the clinic, but otherwise you should be running the clinic. So that's kind of the expectation that I give to the students. And if there's anything that they don't know, I give them the cliche answer. Well, I'm gonna need you to look that up. We don't have time to go over it right now, but you can look that up and then we can talk about it tomorrow. You come with your questions. And encouraging that self learning, I think, really prepares them for the provider role because there's so much self learning as a provider. As
Yeah.
far as like just CEUs,
Yeah.
if you don't know anything about a conditioning, learning about that specific condition, how it's treated, what have you, as well too. So teaching the students how to do that early on and be advocates for their own learning. Um, I think it's been great just hearing the students say how much they appreciate it, even when I feel like, okay, this rotation probably wasn't that great for you. You didn't get to do as much. It's like, oh no, it was still great. So I mean, that's really nice when to hear them say that because I do want them to learn as much as they can. Because like I said, they're
Yeah.
our healthcare providers of tomorrow. So you don't want to send them with a lackluster education out into the field. So anybody could be
100%.
seeing anyone the next day.
Yeah, I think you made a great point too, because when you when you're in that student role first of all, you might not be with the same preceptor every day. And that can be
Mm-hmm.
really tough for the student because you're going from somebody who's like, yes, do everything, go see this patient. This today is yours. You organize it how you need to organize it. I'm here. Or you might have somebody that it's more of like a shadow day and all you can do is shadow, and that's not super useful for you. It
Mm-hmm.
is maybe for the first week, maybe the second week, but then after that you need to be starting to participate. And it's hard to find preceptors who understand that all the time, especially when you're transitioning them through different preceptors. So I think you made a
Right.
great point about really optimizing where they're at, knowing that you're going to graduate, especially if you're a month or two from graduation. Like, we need to be working on skills that you feel uncomfortable with, working towards getting your confidence up, working on understanding the workflow and how to manage that as well. So I think that, I'm kind of curious. Like, I've had both in my preceptor training, or when I was a student. I've had rotations that I was super frustrated, constantly advocating for yourself to be able to take on more work in the clinic. And then the opposite, where you were doing a lot more in the clinic as a student. I guess from your experience, do you operate in that? Did your time as a student impact how you are as a preceptor now? And did you feel like your own practicum experience was like a really positive experience, or kind of, up and down like most are?
Yeah, I think my practicum experience definitely shaped my experience as a provider and how I precept students. I was lucky that all my preceptors were like, "You're running the show today. I'm following you." So that was valuable experience. And I realized, like, from those rotations, that's where I learned the most. Is when
Yeah.
they like cut you loose. I had one preceptor. It was my second day there. She's like, "All right, so you're gonna run the clinic today." I was like, "Wait, it's only my second day." Like, this, it was my first OB rotation too. She's like, "It's fine. What are you gonna do? Like, you're not gonna harm them. I'm like, here." She's like, "So you go see him, come back, give me a report, and this is how we're gonna do today." I was like, "You're not gonna be in a room with me at all? No. You're gonna do all this. The nurse is there. Let the nurse know what you need." Like, and then that was it. It was like 30 patients a day. It was a busy clinic, and
Wow. Yeah.
yeah. And if I was running behind, she knock on the door, check, "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, yeah, I'm just talking." All right. Well, the next patient's next door." Like, she would keep me on schedule. Like, we were
Wow.
going. I would say the only thing with that rotation is I didn't chart. So as a student, I
Yeah.
was able to keep up with the fast pace of that clinic with 30 patients a day, but I didn't have the charting aspect. So it still wasn't reality, but it was a great learning experience for sure.
100%. I love that you had that opportunity to do that, because especially from the get-go, from day two, especially if you're full-time there and you're spending a lot of time, we're completing a lot of hours. So the more you're immersed in the clinic rotation, the clinic schedule, the better off, the more you're going to get out of your clinical rotation. So what would you say to a student that's having maybe a so-so clinical, they're bouncing back and forth between, or I guess, what are some ways that as a student you could advocate for yourself to hopefully, I mean, you have your professor to help you with this too, but maybe what are some things that you wish you experienced a little bit more of during your clinical rotations, or if a student's struggling to kind of have more responsibility in the role, what are some ways they maybe could bring up this conversation with their preceptor from your perspective as one?
I think just explaining what all you can do, what you are comfortable with doing, and showing initiative. Like, if you don't know something, looking it up.
Mm,
The students that I have that really show that initiative, they're like, "Oh yeah, I can do that. That's no problem." Those really are the students that have excelled. Versus, I understand some people are shy, but unfortunately, during your practicum, it's really not a time to be shy. You really have to be ambitious. Um, be very clear and direct in what you can do, what you're comfortable with doing. It's sort of like
yeah.
when you go to like a job interview, you're like selling your skills. That's what students should also look at, that practicum experience. Like, this provider, they're very busy. They're probably meeting you in the middle clinic in between patients. So you need to quickly have your elevator speech together. "Oh yeah, I can do X, Y, and Z. I'm comfortable with this. I'm right here in this part of my program," so that they know your comfort level where you're at as well
Yeah.
too. I think that's super helpful for students to be able to do more than just shadow. It should not be a shadowing experience, but unfortunately for some, it ends up being that. And that may be because they've been quiet for all their other previous practicums and being very reserved, and they haven't had that time to do that hands-on opportunity. And then here they are getting closer to graduation, and it's there's a balance. But yeah, when the students come to me, I think I have the reputation. They know they're gonna do work. It's not gonna be a shadowing experience. At my job, we don't get a choice whether we have students or not. They rotate
Mm.
through the different providers. Like you mentioned, we have that model, so it's not like I can say no to the students. I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna have you today, you're gonna work. You're gonna
Yeah.
work today. So
And you've gotten a lot of feedback that your students really enjoyed that aspect of having you as a preceptor. They feel like they're getting empowered. They feel more confident at the end of the day. They also learned a lot. They gain new skills. And so that's so important. And also, people don't realize that when you're precepting, you learn a lot too,
mhm.
because maybe you're not up to date on what the most evidence based practice changes are, or maybe guidelines just changed and you need to refresh your memory. We all do. It's constantly learning, it's constantly changing. That's the human body for you. So, it is fun to also learn, and it keeps our skill sets up too. And depending on your certification, you also get CME time or hours that you can use if you're precepting too or teaching. So that's also one positive thing that preceptors can think about when they're taking on students or having more students during their day. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, Curious, Destiny, have you found, so being in healthcare for 3 years, do you feel like, or being an advanced practice registered nurse for the past 3+ years now, how do you think you've really like found, what do you think about healthcare? Have you found your passion? Do you enjoy it? What are some maybe like words of advice you might have for somebody thinking about becoming a nurse practitioner?
So, words of advice. Well, first, maybe I'll start with my passion. So, my
Yeah.
passion in healthcare that I found for me is really taking care of women. I enjoy taking care of women who have chronic pelvic pain, sexual dysfunction, menopause concerns. The reason why I love that particular group is because they're often the forgotten group of patients. They usually go through years of trying to figure out what's going on, bouncing
Yeah.
provider to provider without answers. And at first, those were some of my challenging patients. Like, I'm not really sure what to do. I was like, wait a second, there has to be something we can do. And there is. It's just you have to seek out that specialized education and training. A lot of that stuff is not taught during in med school, is not taught during PA school or during nurse practitioner school, is taught after you've gotten your degree, your certification, is through those specialized conferences, organizations, hands-on programs that you really learn this material to help these
Hmm.
patients. And I found that very rewarding, having those complex patients and then helping them to develop a plan of care, treatment plan that works for them. I found that to be very rewarding for myself. And then, as far as the advice that I would give a new grad or someone who's considering becoming a nurse practitioner, make sure it's what you want to do and that you are passionate about something in healthcare, something that you can do as a nurse practitioner. The burnout is very real. It can happen very quickly if you don't have your boundaries in place. It's easy to get discouraged based on the culture, the fast paced environment of healthcare as well. So, really being able to fall back on that passion is so important. Make sure you're going into it for the right reasons. Don't go into it for the schedule. Don't go into it for the money. Because at the end of the day, schedule money, that is not enough to keep you anywhere. It's not. You
Mm-hmm.
really have to have a heart for what you're doing in order to continue doing it day after day after day. Because you're going to have some hard days. You're going to have some rough days. You're going to have some days like, I'm not sure if I should be doing this. I'm not sure if I want to come back tomorrow. That's all normal. But what keeps you coming back is that passion. And if you don't have that passion and you're just going into it because it seems what's right, that's not going to make a successful, fulfilling career at all. And you're going to find yourself burnt out very, very quickly.
Yeah. Well, very well said. I think that you gave a lot of great advice today, not only for a new provider, but also for somebody that's experienced as well. I think it's so important to be passionate about it, to continuously educate yourself, to seek out, exactly like you said, more specialized training, because a lot of that training happens after we graduate. And it's hard to do that. It's really hard in your day to go get those extra certifications, to get your menopause certification, but it only can help you as a provider and at the end help our patients. And that's really what it's all about. So thanks so much for joining us today. I am so excited that you were able to come on to Twomey Time, and hopefully we can have you on again in the future for another episode. But thanks so much. And if someone's looking to reach out to you, maybe what are some ways that they could reach out to you?
If someone's looking to reach out to me, you can always find me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, I'm not on social media much. So LinkedIn would be the best way.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time today, and looking forward to having you on another episode. Thanks so much, Destiny.
Thank you for having me.